A kid that is 8 years old right now, at 18, wouldn't remember Bud Crawford.
I seen the video from my boy YSM Sports Media. He had an interview with Greg Hackett. I'm sure you guys are familiar with Greg Hackett.
Get the lights up.
But he has some interesting take on remembering Terence Crawford, remembering Jaron Ennis. Who would be more remembered by the kids today?
If you think about how long it took for Bud to get his recognition and how long in between that time where Boots start getting talked about, if you think about it, if you think about the ages, Boots being 28 and Bud being 38, if Bud was to retire right now and then the next 10 years go and Boots fight and do whatever he gonna do and then retire at 38, a kid that is 8 years old right now at 18 wouldn't remember Bud Crawford. They would remember Boots Ennis in a matter of 10 years. You understand? That's not saying Bud not a great fighter. Bud is a great fighter. But what's happening is I think Bernie is feeling like, I've been telling y'all about my man. Y'all wasn't rocking then. Now y'all understand. Now y'all trying to talk about this guy. But we still ain't finished our party. You know what I'm saying? We still over here. We partying too. We getting busy. It's not about Bud not being that. He is that.
After hearing what he had to say, an 8-year-old currently today, that I would imagine this 8-year-old follows boxing. He kind of understands to a degree a little bit what's going on, right? But you say the 10-year age gap. Jaron Ennis is 28 years old. Terence Crawford is 38 years old. And when this 8-year-old becomes 18, who will be remembered more? Jaron Ennis or Terence Crawford? Now, as we know from Terence Crawford's career, for the majority of his career, I wouldn't say he wasn't popular, but Top Rank don't necessarily do a good job of promoting fighters, pushing fighters. And if we look at any fighter, whether they're black, white, Hispanic, Top Rank just don't know how to promote fighters. Lomachenko wasn't a big draw. Teofimo Lopez wasn't a big draw. Floyd Mayweather wasn't a big draw. A lot of fighters throughout boxing history, even to today, when dealing with Top Rank, they just wasn't as big as they could have been. Maybe outside of Manny Pacquiao. And of course, he had the Filipino fans to help with that, right? They contributed, the Filipino boxing fans contributed to Manny Pacquiao's popularity, right? But not so many guys that was under Top Rank banner was big as they could have been. But once certain guys left Top Rank, that's when they thrived. Oscar De La Hoya, Floyd Mayweather, even Terence Crawford. Now, one may say Terence Crawford left Top Rank a little too late, but if we been paying attention to boxing, there was a certain entity called PBC that seen a guy like Terence Crawford lingering outside their building. They didn't want to let Terence Crawford in for the longest time. And you had guys guarding the building: Keith Thurman, Sean Porter, Errol Spence Jr., Eudenis Ugas, Danny Garcia, amongst a few others, right? Guarding this building. They wouldn't let Bud Crawford in for the longest time. He on the wrong side of the street. Oh, he signed to the wrong promoter, right? We heard it all. Until one day, Errol Spence Jr. decided to let Terence Crawford in through the back door. And as we know, Terence Bud Crawford was bad business for Premier Boxing Champions. This is what I've been saying for years. He's just bad business for those guys. Why? Because, well, he can go over there and whoop everybody and not stick around. And this would be bad for PBC's bottom line. Well, that's essentially what happened. Terence Bud Crawford went in there through the back door. Errol Spence let him in. He went in there. He fought Errol Spence, beat Errol Spence. And then the building started to crumble, right? There, Terence Bud Crawford popularity rose, right? He beat the mighty Errol Spence Jr., a fight that was 5 years in the making. Took that long, damn near that long, for that fight to get made. So there goes some years off of his career right there, waiting for the big fight with Errol Spence Jr., a fighter who was very popular coming from Texas, right? Dallas, Texas, Fort Worth, Texas. But Errol Spence been criminally inactive for years. So the division was kind of on hold waiting for Errol Spence Jr. Meanwhile, Terence Bud Crawford receiving criticism. They're blaming him for his lack of quality opposition. Even though when the fans named a certain opponent for Crawford to fight, to fight this opponent, stubborn as Terence Crawford was, he fought these opponents, and, well, that opponent wasn't nothing. Oh, well, he was out the door. Oh, well, he was damaged goods, right? So the narrative for Terence Crawford, it didn't help his popularity too much, right? Because when a casual fan see Terence Crawford, oh, well, he's a great fighter, but, well, I guess he ain't fought nobody, right? And these was champions he beat and, former champions. But he didn't beat nobody. Fast forward some time. Hardcore fans notice Terence Crawford is the hottest name in the sport, the most talked about fighter in the sport. BKL Prime wanted to do business with him. Everybody wanted to do business with Bud, but certain guys wanted to stay away from Bud. Guys like Eddie Hearn publicly came out and said, they just can't really find nobody to fight Crawford. They don't want to do business with him. Bob Arum didn't do Crawford any justice, right? But Terence Crawford didn't give up, right? Next thing we know, Terence Bud Crawford finds himself in a fight with Canelo Alvarez. Of course, this is after Israel Midrimov, but he finds himself in a Canelo Alvarez opportunity, and, he beats Canelo Alvarez, and the rest is history, right? And now at 38 years old, Terence Bud Crawford is where he should have been about 5 or 6 years ago. But what an 8-year-old kid today who follows boxing, by the way, remember Terence Bud Crawford. Because when I remember what Jaron Ennis more recently said, he's been watching tapes of Sugar Ray Leonard, Pernell Whitaker, a lot of the fighters from yesterday, almost like he wasn't very familiar with these fighters, right? Almost like he wasn't just too familiar with them. But he never forgot them or he know who they are. See, the thing is, right, and I don't necessarily disagree with what Greg Hackett said, but we are in the social media age. Yeah, that's right. Back when I was growing up, back when I was 8 years old, we didn't have internet to go back and watch old footage of Muhammad Ali. We didn't have old footage or the internet to go back and watch footage at any time, by the way, of Sugar Ray Leonard, Roberto Duran, Tommy Hearns, Marvelous Marvin Hagler, right? We didn't have the internet to go do these things, but yet and still we heard about these fighters. We knew about these fighters. We didn't have access to watch these pay-per-views all the time as children, right? As kids, back in my era, right? We didn't have the internet to go back and watch a fight we may have missed. And if our parents wasn't boxing fans, well, we didn't really see none of these pay-per-view fights. And a lot of the big fights were on pay-per-view back then. You heard of Mike Tyson, Evander Holyfield, these names, right? You heard of these guys, and you never forgot them. I ain't never forgot them, right? James Toney, never forgot him. So when we look at Jaron Ennis, an 8-year-old kid today will definitely remember who he is. But Jaron Ennis, it's very similar to Terence Crawford in a lot of ways. Whether you like to admit it or not, their career paths, some of the small differences here and there, right? But pretty similar. Jaron Ennis, the narrative right now for him is that he ain't fought nobody. Extremely talented, dynamic fighter, but he ain't fought nobody. But see, the difference with Terence Crawford, when they claim he ain't fought nobody, one thing that Top Rank did do well was matchmaking, right? They match-made well. And everybody that Bud Crawford fought was either some type of undefeated fighter or some guy that was coming off a big win or something like that, right? It wasn't just some random dude coming off a loss or had multiple losses. It was always somebody pretty solid for the most part. He fought a lot of Olympic caliber fighters. He fought a lot of undefeated fighters, right? But they wasn't the most popular fighters. PBC at the time had all the popular fighters. But Terence Crawford ends up beating one of the most popular fighters in the sport of boxing in Saul Canelo Alvarez. I would imagine that people will remember Terence Bud Crawford just like how we remember Roy Jones Jr., just like how we remember Lennox Lewis, right? A lot of us were kids when these guys were in their primes. But we never forgot them. Never forgot him. Antonio Tarver, guys like him, never forgot him. So I don't necessarily agree with Greg Hackett's statement, because I come from an age where I remember when the internet first began. I remember VHS. I remember cassette tapes. I remember pay phones, right? I remember a time before we got into the digital age, the electronic era, whatever you call it, social media age. I remember a time before that, and I still remember who Roy Jones was. Why? Because they had VHS tapes that you could buy, and then sooner, a little bit later, DVDs came out. But you could buy DVDs or the VHS, and they had compilation videos of these fighters' knockouts. Right? They had these things, so that was our way of seeing who these guys were. Of course, they had magazines, Ring Magazine, things of that nature as well. And then when the internet first came around, before YouTube or anything, there was websites like Fight Hype. Salute to Fight Hype, because I remember I used to be on Fight Hype years ago, before YouTube really was what it is today. I used to go on Fight Hype and read about what's going on in boxing. So I'm not quite sure. I guess it just depends. It depends on what Jaron Boots Ennis does in his career to where people will remember him. At 28 years old, I would say, in comparison, Terence Crawford accomplished a lot more at 28 than Jaron Boots Ennis has. Right? Terence Crawford is a multi-divisional champion, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. One of the most accomplished fighters in boxing. He just was lacking the marquee fights. Now, who is a marquee fight for Jaron Boots Ennis to where that will take his popularity to the next level? Because right now, it's really hardcore fans talking about Jaron Boots Ennis. And right now, we don't know if he could sell outside of Philadelphia. Terence Bud Crawford always sold out in Omaha, Nebraska. Terence Bud Crawford damn near always sells out wherever he fights. When Terence Bud Crawford was fighting on ESPN, he was one of the most highest viewed fighters, right? Oh, well, his pay-per-view numbers ain't good. Well, nobody's pay-per-view numbers is any good. And I will argue that a lot of the numbers that we were getting today was claiming, especially with Premier Boxing Champions, because they was the main people doing pay-per-views at the time, the numbers are inflated. They say, oh, well, they did 400,000 buys. Take about 200,000, 250,000 off of that, right? So nobody's really doing good with pay-per-view because it was a dying model. So I guess as you could say, it's almost debatable if Jaron Boots Ennis will be remembered more than Terence Bud Crawford by, I guess you could say, kids. Right? Because if you're a kid and you're a boxing fan, you're going to look to see who are the best fighters. Right? Like, I remember being a kid, and I never forgot some of the fighters I remember. Prince Nassim Hamed was one of my favorite fighters as a kid. I never forgot the guy. You know what I'm saying? I never forgot him. So, I don't disagree. So if an 8-year-old kid today, 8, 9, 10-year-old kid today, that's a boxing fan, that actually maybe even trains boxing, and they know currently, right now in boxing, the best fighter is Terence Bud Crawford, I don't think they'll ever forget him. I don't think, depending on how Jaron Boots Ennis' career plays out, I don't think he will be remembered more than Terence Bud Crawford because of the big moves that Terence Bud Crawford made towards the end of his career. Catapulted him into damn near the Mount Rushmore of boxing. Terence Bud Crawford is driving down Goat Avenue. Now, if he was to say a guy like Andre S.O.G. Ward, who may not have had as much, I guess you could say the word I want to use is screen time as Bud, as many fights as Bud, as many marquee fights, but a guy may not remember Andre S.O.G. Ward. Maybe, right? It really depends on how much the kid is a boxing fan. And for the kids today, luckily for them, they have the internet to where they can look up who's the best boxer. Then they can watch all of their fights. See, we'll be lucky if we can find a DVD or a VHS that had all this particular fighter's fights. We may find a video that had their greatest highlights, the greatest knockouts, but not full fights. Yeah, it'd be kind of hard to find, especially as a kid, right? So, I don't know. It's one of those things, man. I don't know. What do you guys think? Will Jaron Boots Ennis be remembered more than Terence Bud Crawford by the kids? I guess like I said before, it all depends on what Jaron Boots Ennis does within the next 10 years. But tell me what you guys think. Is Greg Hackett on to something? Is he just being biased because, well, he is from Philadelphia as well and Jaron Boots Ennis is the hometown kid? Or will Terence Bud Crawford really be a forgotten fighter by the youth today? Like, subscribe, holla at your boy. Peace out.